The storm came down hard on the plains, a black curtain of rain slashing against the widow's cabin. Wind moaned through the chinks in the wood, rattling the shutters as if some restless ghost clawed to get inside. She stood by the fire with her arms crossed tight around herself, watching the flames lick the logs, pretending the world beyond those walls no longer had claws that could reach her. But the knock came anyway. It wasn't timid, it was heavy, insistent, soaked in desperation. She froze, her heart climbing into her throat. No traveler should be abroad on a night like this. No decent man, at least. Lightning cracked across the sky, and in that flash she saw a shadow through the window, broad-shouldered, dripping with rain. When she opened the door, he leaned against the frame as though the wind itself had driven him there. His hat brim dripped water, his boots were caked in mud, and his eyes, sharp, gray as gunmetal, fixed on her with something that felt like hunger. His voice came low, almost a growl swallowed by the storm. "I'd trade 10 herds for one night inside you." She stiffened, hand tightening on the door, ready to slam it shut. But he caught her wrist, not harshly, not begging either, more like a man who already knew he was damned. His grip was rough, calloused, trembling with the cold. "You've mistaken me," she said sharply. "This isn't some saloon." He smiled crooked, a scar splitting his lip. "Saloon girls don't keep 1,200 acres of grass the color of emerald. I've seen it. You run this place alone." The widow's jaw set. She pulled her hand free and stepped back, silently daring him to follow. He did, and the storm followed him inside, dripping puddles onto the wood floor. He smelled of wet leather and whiskey. For a moment the fire cracked, and she thought of her husband, the last time she'd seen him alive, coat dark with blood, sprawled in the dust while neighbors whispered that the land had cursed them both. She swallowed the memory down like bile. "You can dry by the fire, stranger. But that's all." He tugged his coat off, water flying, and crouched by the hearth. His shoulders were wider than the chairbacks, his hands scarred from old fights. There was something restless about him, like a wolf denied sleep. "I'm no stranger to your name," he said. "Widow McCall. Folks whisper about you in every tavern from Abilene to Santa Fe. Say men who touch your shadow don't live to tell of it." Her breath caught. The cruelty of gossip always cut deep. "Then best you keep your distance." His gaze lifted to hers, steady, unflinching. "Maybe I don't mind a short life if it's lived right." She turned away, angry at the heat rising in her cheeks. How dare he come into her home, speaking in riddles, daring her to remember she was still flesh and blood. She busied herself with the kettle, though her hands trembled so fiercely the tin rattled. For a long silence, the storm filled the room, hammering like hooves on the roof. She almost thought he'd fallen asleep by the fire until his voice rose again, softer now. "I lost my brother last winter. Cattle raid. Kid barely 17. I was supposed to watch his back." He stopped, jaw working as though chewing words too bitter to swallow. "Now I drink too much, gamble too hard, kiss too fast. Figure if I can't keep the people I love safe, might as well burn out quick." The widow paused with the kettle in her hands. She hadn't asked for his confession, but it rang true. She understood guilt's weight, how it bent a body until standing tall felt impossible. Her own grief pressed on her chest every morning when she woke alone. "Then why here?" she asked. "Why my door?" He looked at her the way a man looks at the last light on the trail. "Because you're as lonesome as me." Her knees weakened. She wanted to scream at him, shove him back into the storm, yet some part of her burned at the raw honesty. No man had spoken to her like that since before her husband's blood had dried on the street. She turned quickly, hiding her face in the fire's glow. The kettle whistled. She poured, setting a cup before him. He drank without thanks, eyes never leaving her. The silence stretched, filled only by thunder. And then, hoofbeats. Faint at first, then louder, like drums rolling across the plain. She froze. He rose, cup forgotten, hand sliding to the revolver at his hip. "You brought trouble," she whispered, horror creeping into her chest. His jaw tightened. "Didn't mean to. They've been chasing me since Fort Worth." "Who?" "Men with more money than mercy." I shot a cattle baron's son at a poker table. His father hired killers to bring me back, dead or breathing. She stared at him, the firelight painting harsh lines on his face. Shelter him, and she'd invite death into her house. Cast him out, and perhaps she could still live quietly, with only grief as her companion. You should go, she said finally, her voice breaking on the words. But he shook his head, loading bullets into the chamber, each metallic click louder than thunder. No time. They'll be at the door before I cross the yard. Her pulse hammered in her ears. She had sworn never to touch a gun again, not after it had stolen her husband. Yet the thought of men storming her house, tearing apart the only home she had left, twisted something fierce inside her. Outside, the hoofbeats slowed. Shadows shifted against the window, 3, maybe 4 riders. A voice called through the storm, mocking and cruel. Come out, drifter. Or we'll light the widow's cabin and roast you inside it. Her breath hitched. She looked at the cowboy. He smirked, spinning the revolver once before snapping it shut. Guess the night ain't over yet, widow. The storm roared, the shadows drew closer, and her world tilted between terror and desire. The fire hissed low, throwing sparks like stars, and she knew the night would demand a price from them both. She tightened her grip on the kettle, heart pounding, as the door rattled beneath the weight of fists and thunder. The cabin no longer felt like a place of mourning, it was a stage, waiting for blood and fire to write their names upon it. And though she hated herself for it, some hidden part of her whispered that she wanted to see how far this storm would carry them. The first shot cracked like a whip, splinters flying from the doorframe. The widow ducked, dragging the cowboy down with her as bullets tore through the wood. Smoke and rain mingled in the air, the scent sharp and bitter. Her heart pounded so hard she thought it might burst through her ribs. The cowboy moved with startling calm, revolver already raised. He fired through the window, each shot a thunderclap that briefly silenced the storm. A body fell outside with a grunt, and the horses screamed, hooves thrashing mud. Keep low, he growled. The widow scrambled toward the hearth, her fingers closing around the rifle that leaned forgotten against the wall. Her husband's rifle. For a moment she froze, the weight of memory crushing her chest, his hands guiding hers, his voice telling her to steady, steady, before blood soaked the dirt and she was left with only echoes. She shoved the grief aside, forced herself to breathe, and pulled the weapon close. Another outlaw shouted from the darkness. Give him up, woman, and we'll spare your hide. Her hands trembled on the stock. She wanted to believe the lie, but she had lived long enough to know mercy was rare currency in the West. The cowboy fired again, ducking back as lead whined past his head. He glanced at her, gray eyes sharp even in the gloom. You ever shoot before? Her voice cracked. Once. That'll do. The window shattered. She didn't think she pulled the trigger. The recoil slammed into her shoulder, the roar filling her ears, and outside, a man screamed. She dropped the rifle in horror, while burning her throat. The cowboy caught it, steadying her. First kill always feels like hell, he murmured. Don't let it eat you. She stared at him, gasping, a tear streaking her cheek despite the fire in her veins. He wasn't comforting her, he was reminding her to survive. The storm outside thickened, gunfire rolling back and forth, bullets gouging holes into the walls. Smoke choked the air. The widow reloaded with trembling fingers while the cowboy's revolver barked again and again. Together they held the cabin like a fortress, every shot buying one more breath. Then silence fell, sudden and heavy. Only the hiss of rain on the roof and the crackle of fire remained. Her ears rang. She dared to hope the fight was done. But then a deeper voice carried through the storm, slow and deliberate. Woman, you got grit. But grit won't save you. Hand the drifter over, or by sunrise your land will be ash. The widow's stomach nodded. This was no ordinary outlaw, this was a leader, the kind who didn't bluff. She looked at the cowboy, torn between fear and fury. If I give you up, they'll leave me be. He didn't flinch. They'll burn your ranch for spite. Men like that don't leave witnesses. She closed her eyes, breath ragged. Grief had taught her many things, but one truth above all, fear never protected anyone. Her husband had died because men wanted land and power. And now those same forces had come for her again. When she opened her eyes, resolve sharpened them. She lifted the rifle, aimed through the gap in the window, and shouted back into the storm. "Come and take him." The night erupted. Gunfire tore through the cabin, outlaws whooping as they charged. The cowboy leapt through the door, revolver blazing, his figure lit by lightning. The widow fired beside him, shot after shot, until smoke swallowed her vision and her shoulder burned with each recoil. Horses screamed. Men cursed. Mud churned under boots as the fight spun into chaos. She caught glimpses of bodies falling, flashes of steel and fire. The cowboy fought like a man who had nothing left to lose, each shot measured, each move quick and brutal. Then he staggered. A bullet punched through his side, the sound of his grunt sharper than any thunderclap. He collapsed against the doorframe, blood darkening his shirt. "No," she cried, rushing to him. She dragged him back inside as bullets shredded the porch. His revolver slipped from his hand, but his smirk lingered, faint and stubborn. "Still worth 10 herds, he rasped, breath shallow. "Maybe 12 now." Her throat tightened. She pressed her hand to his wound, feeling hot blood seep between her fingers. He chuckled weakly, then winced, the sound half-laugh, half-groan. Outside, the outlaws hesitated. The storm had broken their charge, the widow's defiance had cost them dearly. And then, hoofbeats again, but heavier, steadier. Voices shouting commands. Lanterns cutting through the dark. Lawmen. The outlaws scattered, melting into the rain, their leader cursing before vanishing into the night. Within minutes the chaos ebbed, leaving only silence, smoke, and the widow's ragged breathing. She held the cowboy close, refusing to let him slip into the dark. When the door creaked open, a deputy stepped inside, eyes wide at the wreckage. "You all right, ma'am?" She lifted her chin, blood on her hands, hair wild, eyes fierce. "We'll manage." The deputy nodded, already moving on to chase the fleeing riders. The cabin fell quiet once more. The widow turned back to the cowboy, who blinked up at her with a crooked grin. "Looks like you're stuck with me a while, till I heal." She let out a shaky laugh, the first true laugh since her husband's death. "Maybe that's not the worst fate." He closed his eyes, resting against her, a faint smile still on his lips. Dawn crept over the horizon, painting the plains in pale gold. Smoke curled from the cabin roof, but it still stood. The widow looked out over her land, battered yet unbroken, and felt something stir in her chest. Not the end of grief, but the beginning of something beyond it. Her hand lingered on the cowboy's shoulder as the sun rose higher, light spilling across the wounded world. Somewhere inside, she knew the West had taken much from her, but in its cruel way, it had given her back a reason to breathe. And though the storm had passed, the echo of hoofbeats promised this story wasn't over.